speedboat, and he came over and picked me up, and it was Ian Cohen, and went on the back of his little Zodiac, and he had a high-powered water pistol which he was squirting the sailors. There's some French sailors on another boat down the side of Garden Island. So it was an interesting experience being out there shooting for the first time. That's the Sydney Peace Squadron down in the bottom corner. And what the police would do is they would they'd come up to you and grab the rope from the front of your canoe and tie it to the back of their speedboat and then take you off to the other end of the harbour. So by the time you got back, it was, another 20 minutes, half an hour. Okay, so went down to the southeast forests of New South Wales just to photograph the blockades that were happening down there. This is in 1995. And it just amazed me the number of trucks that were constantly coming through. Now, when I turned up at the first blockade, this is what I came across, and this really inspired me. These three girls, it was the first thing that I saw and the first thing that I photographed, the first time I'd been into the forests to photograph a blockade. And sorry, if we could just go back just to that. Yep. So I just found these girls were about to be arrested. They had such a strong sense of courage and still happy at the same time, even though they're about to get arrested. It really inspired me to take this picture. It was the first one. That's Richard Jones on the left there. That's when he was with the Democrats at the time. And you can see the loggers up in the background and all the protesters down in the foreground here. Then the cops came in and gave a warning that everyone's about to be arrested. That doesn't leave. They had tripods. Thanks, David. Yep, so they put tripods. So this was on the way to the Eden woodchip mill. And the logging trucks were banked up kilometres, and the police rescue was trying to get through. It took them ages to get past all the logging trucks. So they held, sorry, David, they held up, so this costs them money, basically. And I think it's a really good exercise because, like in photographing with Sea Shepherd, it's the one thing that the Japanese whalers put them on the back foot was when it starts to cost people money. They don't listen to the politics, they don't listen to anything else or the information. So when the police rescue eventually got in, you can see them just in the foreground here, everyone locked on around the base of the tripods, and as soon as they started removing people there, they already had organised, a few people had gone and locked onto the actual police rescue vehicle, so then it took them another few hours to get rid of them. Okay, thank you. Also, it was interesting, these loggers, I think were just waiting to punch me out. The cops were behind them, so they couldn't do anything. But they'd actually attacked a couple of the demonstrators, and from what I heard, the cops had actually been seen by the demonstrators sitting on the mountainside waiting for all the commotion to finish, and then they were going to come down. So that's the difficulty when you're demonstrating in these remote towns. There's a lot of the time the cops can be the brothers of some of the loggers down there, and so it gets a little bit personal. So they came in to arrest. Thanks, David. That's just some clear felling in Tasmania. And it became quite a big, this is just before the regional forests agreements that came through. This is a demonstration in Sydney. And this was a demonstration in Pennant Hills in Sydney. This is where the Forestry Commission was. That's my flatmate, actually. So it was quite funny. They had a logger dressed up. They had a koala, and they had a couple of other animals, and they had this little theatre skit going on because we were locked out of the Forestry Commission offices. But just in one moment, sorry, David, just in one moment, the roller doors came up to the underground parking, and the animals ran through, and then the logger ran after the animals with a cut-out cardboard chainsaw, and then the cops ran after them, and they went running through the building. It was a bit like a Benny Hill skit. And so that's them getting arrested in the car park. This was a demonstration to protect a tree at Taylor Square in Sydney. And that young guy, you can see in the top right there, I'd photographed him on his 16th birthday getting capsicum sprayed, and we've stayed in touch since. He locked himself onto a tree at Taylor Square. Okay, so I heard that there was going to be a walk, what was meant to be a peaceful walk in Papeete in Tahiti during the last of the French nuclear testing. And so I decided to try and get over there and managed to scramble some money together from all sorts of places. Interestingly enough, actually, when I contacted, I rang up Air New Zealand because of what happened with the Rambo Warrior, and I thought, oh, they'll be supportive of me going. Maybe they can give me a free ticket or something. And the woman there said, look, we'd really like to support you, but we can't take a political stand. We're a company, etc. So she said, good luck, support what you're doing. I said, no worries. And I put the phone down, and about 15 minutes later, I got a phone call, and she called me up, and she said, look, I'm calling you privately. I've left a ticket for you at wholesale price downstairs. Don't mention my name, don't mention Air New Zealand. So, it was really helpful. So I get there, and what was meant to be a peaceful march, a peaceful walk, once the French, sorry David, just 1 sec. Once the French tested the first of the nuclear bombs that was underground, the local community, you could tell there was agitation, and people gathered at the Parliament House. People were pulling on the fence, etc. And I was thinking to myself, oh, that's like a really quiet response to what's gone on. And then the next day, I was with some of the media, and there's a lot of Australian politicians there as well, mostly Labor politicians that were there to demonstrate against what was going on. And anyway, we all got taken on mopeds, what we thought was to a union meeting, and next thing, one of the organisers said to us that the police are coming and we're going to have to take you somewhere else. So we all got put on the back of mopeds and went through along the coastal road, and next thing we found ourselves getting dumped on the airport runway. Thanks, David. On the airport runway, and dumped right in between the French riot police and the Tahitians, who there was rocks and golf clubs and baseball bats, and the cops were using tear gas and rubber bullets. So a riot ensued, and they burnt the airport. Thanks, David. And this is all through the car park, and big demonstrations and riots happened all around the ring road of the airport. Thanks, David. So this is, this is an example too. Also, when you're photographing, things can be really sensitive, and especially if you don't know anyone there and you've just turned up. So I approached. There were 3 guys. They could see I was photographing. They just let me be. And I approached these. There were 3 guys sitting here. I want to get a photo of them all, and I sort of just pointed. I don't speak French. I pointed to my camera, and I went like this, and there was no reply. So I stopped. And then this guy, who was sitting in the middle of them, just pulled up the rock and the Molotov cocktail for me to take the picture. This guy came and asked me for a lighter. I didn't smoke at the time. He got a lighter, and they torched about 80 cars in the car park at the airport. Now, I've just included this photo. Unfortunately, when I got back and I took my photos off to a magazine, they used an image, but when I went to go and pick up my negatives, it was just my colour negatives. For literally a split second, I got up to go and call a friend. I'd left it on a park bench, and I lost 25 rolls of colour film. So I've still got black and white film, and I keep that as a memory. That was one of the colour negatives that was during the riots there. And it's also a big lesson about how to be so careful. You learn these lessons along the way. Okay, so this is in the Philippines in 1996. I went to go and document with a couple of video documentary people the effects of mining on indigenous communities and the environment. And we spent a month travelling around the different islands and communities. Sorry, David, we're just to show the effects of the varying stages of mining and the effects of mining on the communities. This here is a mine in a place called Sipalai on the island of Negros, which is a central island of the Philippines. This is a 75-metre high tailings dam, 276 hectares of toxic waste, a lot of it cyanide. You can see how it's just been pushed together to hold it up. This is one of one of three, by the way. There's 3 of these tailings dams in this area, and this sits in the juncture of 2 rivers. This is a river running down what has been a river running down on the right-hand side here, and this is where the local communities fish, where they get their fresh water, where they bathe, and it's full of toxic sediment. When we were filming down here, this mine threatened to collapse on top of us. It already had holes in it, and it was raining quite heavily. Community invited us over for lunch, amazingly, when they were they had so little food, but they wouldn't take no from us. They still invited us over for lunch to tell their story. Thanks, David. So while we were there, part of the embankment of the river, because the sediment builds up at the bottom of the river, and part of the embankment collapsed. And this actually happened a couple of weeks before we got there, and it was continuing to collapse while we were there. This is toxic cyanide that's covering their rice fields, the community's rice fields. It's their food source. So the community's got to basically walk through it all to get to their huts, etc. So, and you can see, thanks David, the toxic elements on the kids. This is a Canadian company. Mariculum is the name of the company. So this is on the way to the area that we're going to document. This is in the morning, and thanks David. And this is later on in the afternoon from all the toxic sludge breaking the riverbanks. That was the same house, by the way. So this is a river. Sorry, this is actually a road, which has become a river. The local community, they've got a great sense of humour, the Filipinos. This was built by a Chinese company, that road. They call it the China Road when it's dry and the China Sea when it's flooded from the tailings. This guy's rushing that baby on foot to hospital because they couldn't get an ambulance through. It had poured boiling water on itself by mistake, and so he had to rush it on foot to hospital. Thanks, David. So this is an example of what the mining company supposedly gives to the communities in return for mining on their land. This is a bus stop shelter, and you look at the state of it. This is the so-called development that they give the communities. And this is communities picking up food. There's a local corrupt mayor that was working with the mining company. So we went down south to an island called Mindanao. Mindanao is a really dangerous place. We were warned before we went there we might get kidnapped or knifed or whatever. We're part of a group. There are about 90 people of some journalists and medical people, legal people, etc., to document. This is 2 weeks after an Australian mining company, Western Mining Corporation, had previously... okay, so let me just give you just a very, very quick background. In the Philippines at the time, there was a 1995 so-called free trade agreement. The Philippine government was trying to get international capital coming into their country. They allowed some Australian mining companies, mostly Australian mining companies actually, BHP and Western Mining and Rio Tinto and a couple of other, a couple of other mining companies to help write up the Mining Act. And in the Mining Act, it basically allowed 100,000 hectare concession areas, free damming rights, which meant they could dam any rivers that they wanted, easement rights, which meant they could get rid of indigenous people off the land, And basically could clear the land of trees, etc. And so, at something like, sorry David, we could just go back on, something like 2/3 of the Philippine land area was potentially up for mining. So we went into this community 2 weeks after Western Mining Corporation had, 1.5 months before we got there, Western Mining Corporation had landed by helicopter, landed by helicopter with a local official to tell this community, which is the Blaan community, it's the indigenous community of southern Philippines, up in the mountains. Basically, they said that we want your go-ahead for mining in your area. He said, we don't want you on our land. They tried to bribe him with prostitutes and $20,000, which he refused. And they said, if you don't give us a go-ahead, you're going to hear from us in 1 month. And 1 month later, they came through with Tora warplanes and ground troops, and they machine gunned and bombed local communities. 8 people were killed and 120 families displaced. This is that's an elder. Sorry, David. I'm getting there. That's an elder, a chief of the Blaan tribe who took us through, had us stay in his community, and took us through to show us what had gone on 2 weeks prior. And the military had come through with support of the mining company, and basically they've used wood from this farmer's house for fires. They stole food. They tried to chase people out of the area, etc. And we went through to these different communities to record their story. This is his child had been bombed. That's part of the bomb. And he was holding his 2-year-old, and his 4-year-old was running behind with the planes behind. And he said that he heard an explosion, turned around, and he hasn't seen his child since. She had lost a child when she was crossing the river. She was fleeing. This is a community that went into to document. They were just at the early stages of an Australian company. This is up in the north, Australian company trying to mine in their area. This is an island. It's the only mining company that they had successfully managed to shut down. This company, Canadian company, basically had a secret trapdoor running to the local river, and whenever it would rain heavily, they'd open up this trapdoor to let the toxic waste out into the river system. And there were heavy rains, and the trapdoor had burst open and flooded. I went up about 14 kilometres on a motorbike. It went up for 26 kilometres, and the river was biologically dead. This is in the background there. You can see the river. That's all cyanide, and this is what they have to get through to go fishing. This is at the mouth of the river, the ocean, and they've got to go out kilometres to get their fish. So this is a maritime union dispute, 1998. When John Howard worked with Patrick Stevedores, Chris Corrigan, the head of the company, to push out the union workers on the docks. So I went down, this is in Melbourne at Webb Dock when they were first locked out. Now this is John Coombs. He was the Secretary of Maritime Union. I spent a little bit of time photographing him as well as the protests. He was a great man. He only passed away, unfortunately, about 1.5 years ago. But he was a really good organiser and helped push the case through the courts, which they sort of won in the end. But it became national headlines. And I'd go down to Port Botany in Sydney and photograph the demonstration, which went on for about 2 months, 2.5 months. It's John Coombs addressing some of the union workers. Thanks, David. That's a blockade at Port Botany. So basically, if you remember, the government went and used some of the so-called off-duty SAS soldiers and traded them in Dubai to work on the docks so they could get rid of the union workers. So these are the security. This is some of the workers coming in to work crossing the picket line, which is why all the demonstrators are down there below. That's Greg Combay when he was still with the union, the CFMEU, and he was strategizing with John Coombs at the time. That's down at Port Botany. Thanks, David. And Bill Kelty, thanks. And that's at Trades Hall in Sydney. And, you know, he got a bit of a, you know, he was a really well-liked man, and giving his autograph. So this is on the picket line, that's his wife. Oh no, sorry, that's Jenny George. And this is the night that they won in the courts. And that's his, sorry, and that's his, John Coombs' wife on the left there. Here he's addressing the media. And that's at Darling Harbour at the docks down there. Okay, thank you. Just put this one in. This is just as a little memory of the East Timor protests that happened. This is the day that John Howard's office was surrounded by something like 20,000 people when they finally started to take notice. That was 98. Timbara blockade, this is about 99. Thanks, David. Yep. Okay. Show him what to do with it. Yep, okay, no problem. Okay, thanks, David. Thank you, thanks for that. Thanks. What was your name, sorry? Richard, thanks. Okay, so this is just, this is J18. This is the first globally organised protest. It was done with 4 other cities around the world, and the reason it was done that way was this is the early days of indie media, which I got involved in, which at the time, so this is pre-social media, the internet was around, but protests started to get much better coordinated globally. So this particular demonstration was June the 18th, 1998, organised with 4 cities around the world, and on indie media. So indie media basically was designed by Sydney software engineers, and it allowed people to, and then went global, went to something like 275 cities around the world. So you could actually, for the first time, so I could photograph, write up a story, post it, and then it would be seen globally. And especially, which doesn't sound like much these days, but back then it was like a major revolution, you know. And so as soon as this is the days of film, I'd photograph, I'd go and get the film processed, scan the negatives, and then put it up on the net. Now, if you had coordinated demonstrations globally, that meant that other cities from around the world would actually be interested in seeing what went on in your city. So and as the sun rose, you know, I think it was Australia. No, I think New Zealand might have had one, then Australia, and then I think it was Switzerland, then one of the cities in the US first coordinated. So this was a big demonstration that happened around the city at the time against global. Against multinational corporations. This is Reclaim the Streets, which was really big at the time in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is in Newtown. Thanks, Richard. Okay, it's a World Economic Forum, Melbourne, 2000, something like 20,000 people surrounded the Crown Casino, lots of injuries. They managed to stop a lot of the politicians and the guests coming into the meeting. They had to bring them in by boat and helicopter. Thanks. So we can just run through these, just a few seconds of each. So this guy is just, this cop actually got surrounded. This particular night, there was toing and froing between the cops and the protesters, and we picked up I picked up a milk crate. I could see these cops come running out, and grabbed a milk crate off someone who was kind enough to give it to me so I could get a shot from above. And there's about 200 demonstrators that were battened really badly by the cops. There's probably about 1,000 riot cops came pouring out with riot shields. A lot of people. 2 hospitals were full. They had to send people over to a 3rd hospital. And these people were unarmed. You know, they were just blocking the entrance. Thanks. In Melbourne, Crown Casino in Melbourne. And you can see Natasha here, she was head of the Sydney Uni Student Representative Council at the time, and she got battened. You can see her getting battened in the chest. She got her ribs broken, and she actually was in a court case against the cops, which they won years later. No, the demonstrators won, yeah, for excessive force, etc. Okay, thank you. So you can see the injuries all around the place. These are peaceful protesters. This is one of the anti-corporate globalization protests protecting their free McDonald's. Okay, so this is in the Kalahari Bushmen. They'd been kicked off the land for diamond mining. The government had a 50% share with the mining company, which was De Beers, in a company called Debswana, where so diamonds were found where the Kalahari Bushmen live, and they'd been kicked off the land and put into pretty much refugee camps around their country. So I went to go and photograph their journey to the High Court. This is a woman hadn't seen her son. He'd been out walking, and she thought that the rangers or security had taken her son. She hasn't seen him for a while. Thanks. So just some local community shots in the refugee camp. I stayed with them for a few days before we went to the High Court. It's making leather. Smoking. It's actually smoke through the ground. Put the pipe in the ground and breathe through the soil. So, all right, so we'll just stop here just for 1 second. So this is on the way to the High Court. I actually took an Australian Indigenous necklace. Someone gave it to me, Indigenous person gave it to me to give to the Bushmen to wish them good luck in their court case. And just while they were praying, the guy who I gave it to had realised he'd forgotten it in his hut. And before the car went off and took them all, he ran all the way back to his hut through the desert to go and get the necklace and bring it to the court case. So they're just doing a prayer before they leave. And here they're boarding the trucks, and they went in some jeeps as well. As for many of the Indigenous, many of the Bushmen, it was their first time out of the Kalahari Desert. They're going to the High Court in a main town. That's Survival International, who was helping the Bushmen spearhead the court case, which they eventually won, which basically legally gave them the right to go back onto their land. I like his, I'm from Africa originally. I like his soccer boots, wearing it to the court case. So this is in the truck on the way over. And Africa being Africa, we broke down. And interestingly enough, and just while, sorry, we just go back to that one. While we were waiting for them to fix the truck, some of the Bushmen went off into the bushes to go and grab all the herbs, because some of the herbs that they could get out of where they'd been staying, they hadn't seen in their country for a while. So they gathered all the herbs to take back with them. Okay, thank you. It's on the bus on the way over. And that's going to the High Court. I'll just... That on the left there, that's the Bushman chief. That's the guy that took me into the desert on the right, Bantu. Okay, thank you. And this is the court case. So you've got on the right here, Survival International and the lawyer. The people on the right are helping the Bushmen. The people on the left is government and government lawyer. You can see all the Bushmen in the background listening to the court case. And they won this court case. He'd come all the way from Kenya, the guy on the right. Okay, thank you. It's a Bushman lawyer. And this is when they got the news that they won, and they were celebrating outside. And media, and just the result, you know, it was a very happy moment for them. Okay, so also I've just included, this is a small-scale miner in Zimbabwe. Just makes a little bit of money every day from a tiny bit of gold that he gets. Okay, thanks. This is in Malawi. These ones are just very quick, just to mention. This is an Australian uranium mining company that was going to set up in a river system in Lake Malawi, which basically, again, for water, drinking water, bathing, food, etc., it could potentially pollute, with the tailings dam, pollute the local river. I decided to go on a Sea Shepherd campaign down to Antarctica. I had to meet the boat in Mauritius. We prepared the boat for a month before we headed down. This is the journey. And Richard, if you could move the mouse, please, just off the... Thanks. Yeah, so just a few photos on Aboriginal deaths in custody, which, you know, we're very aware of what's going on with that and how the Royal Commission hasn't been listened to. What are we up to now, Freya? 400 and what? 450? Yeah. The yeah. Well, yes, yeah. So a lot of the recommendations in the Royal Commission haven't been listened to. Constant demonstrations in commemoration of people that have passed in deaths in custody, as well as new ones that come up, unfortunately. So we'll just run through a few of these slides. So I find it very, sorry, if we could just go back. I find it very powerful having everybody's name, and it gives a life story and human face to all the names, these placards at the demonstrations. Thanks. This is TJ Hickey, who got impaled on a fence in Redfern, and there's a yearly commemoration. And the next photo, this is a smoking ceremony on the way to Parliament House. Just at another death in custody. So this is Occupy Sydney. Sorry if we, yeah, and, yep.
Pleased to meet you. Pleased to have you on my plate. Your meat is sweet to me. Your destiny, your fate. You're my life support. Your life is my sport. I'm a man eating machine. I'm a man eating machine. You won't hear me laughing as I terminate your day. You can't trace my footsteps as I walk the other way. I can't let enough prey eating machine for me. I can't get enough prey. A man eating machine for me. A corporate cannibal, digital criminal. I'm a corporate cannibal, a corporate cannibal, criminal, digital criminal, corporate cannibal.
And that's all now big development. All right, we'll move on. So the next series, just one, yep, thank you. Yeah, so this is the G20 up in Brisbane. I went to go and document, stayed at Musgrave Park with the Indigenous community. It's another 10 embassy. So we'll just run through a few of those. They shut down all the streets. They had the military around. So it was the G20, so it was all the global leaders coming together, yep. Okay, so just a climate change rally. It's 2015. School Kids for Climate. Thank you. Okay, we'll just race through these last few. Okay, so this was the third Sea Shepherd campaign I went on. These are just photos that I've done. So so the first one we saved 576 whales that was on. The second one was 932. This one, unfortunately, the Japanese government was working with the whalers, providing satellite technology. So it took us ages to find the factory ship, the whaling factory ship, and we'd have to go out in helicopters every day, and flying off from the ship, you get a much longer reach. This is our captain. She's ex-Dutch and Australian Navy. Thanks, Richard. Yep. So this is out, the amazing thing with the wildlife out there is, they haven't seen any humans. That previous photo, we were out on a Zodiac chasing a harpoon ship, and just came up over the wave, and there just happened to be these penguins sitting on a little iceberg. It's Christmas time. We had to hide behind this iceberg. We had a massive storm the night before, so we were just doing figure eights behind this iceberg, sheltering from the winds. That's a view from the helicopter. It's a tiny space. Now, we happened to, the one time we were out there, we managed to capture for the first time a whale that had been slaughtered in the Australian Antarctic waters. And that just happened to be, luckily, the day that the Japanese Prime Minister had just left Australia. So when we put this out, it went global, and we managed to capture evidence of them whaling. And then we flew over, this is from the helicopter, and the next photo, thank you. And so we flew straight over. Once we came across them, we flew straight over to the harpoon ship, and they must have radioed through. They were further off in the distance, and they were trying to cover the harpoon to make out as if they hadn't been whaling. And then they went and stupidly covered the whale. So it was like a before and after, which made them look guilty. So it's very difficult photographing in these conditions too. I had to use a wet weather cover for my camera. I had to get permission to go out in the storm to photograph. They told me I had to go with someone. I wanted to try and get a wave coming over the bow of the ship, looking towards the ship. Very difficult conditions because it's also freezing cold, so it's very difficult to control your settings on the camera too. Invasion Day. I managed to get an Australian Indigenous flag, which I took over. I took some ashes from the Aboriginal 10 Embassy, which Auntie Jenny gave me. I got them to raise the flag, just so we could commemorate and get an iceberg in the background. That's from the top of, that's probably, I don't know, maybe 25 stories high, this iceberg. It's huge, and thousands of birds on top. That's looking, sorry, if we just go back on that, that's looking down, that's the side of the iceberg on the right, looking from the top. So the two ships, while we were chasing the whalers, we each ran out of different supplies. So two Zodiacs were sent out to meet at a GPS coordinate and exchange food and sheltering behind the iceberg. Now, on our way back, we lost all GPS connection, all radio connection with our ship. So there's some moments here where I just thought, like, there's nothing around. If we wouldn't have reconnected with the ship, that would have been it. So they're trying to get back in touch with the ship again. I just thought, just keep documenting. If they find my camera, it'll at least have the story on there. It's down the side of an iceberg. And that was Aurora Australis coming back towards New Zealand. This is Tent City. Lance Priestley, a very dear friend and a good friend of Freya's, set up a tent city, gave shelter and food for homeless people in Martin Place in Sydney. So we just run through a few of these. He's unfortunately passed away, but did amazing work. Really amazing work. Good person. And that's when the police came in and told everybody to leave. Okay, so just, I wonder why that's like that. Is that it's only playing half of that slide. Would you mind just pressing the escape button, please, and then just pressing the play button again? Yeah. Yeah, there we go, thanks. So just about drought and where our climate is going, thanks. So this was a dust storm that came through Sydney. It's in South Australia. Okay, so this is just fairly recently, only about a month ago or so, the coal protests down in Newcastle. So they managed to stop a coal train, really well organised demonstration actually, I thought it was really well done. And stopped the coal train and got people up on top, and it got a lot of international attention as well too. Is that the largest coal port in the world? Something like 53 arrests. And they didn't give warning, the police too. Normally they give a warning, they just shut the gates and wouldn't let anybody out. So also just thought I'd end on just the anti-protest laws that are going on, which, it's so vital that gets repealed, kind of a democracy without protest. This was the end of this is late last year. As the protest was finishing up at Parliament House, there was the Iranian Women Life Freedom protest that they passed. That's against the protest laws outside Parliament House. And one person that's in jail that shouldn't be, and another one, and two that should be. And that's it, everybody. Thank you very much.